let's do Swapex. Tell me about Swapex. What is the thesis there? And why is it so cool?
Well, Swapex is one of the, I guess if you trace it back far enough, solidly inspired dexes on Sonic. So, another thing that spawned from Andre back in the day. So, there are quite a few dexes on Sonic, but Swapex is where I think the best opportunity is to earn as an LP holding any form of OS. And you're actually seeing here on the screen.
Thank you for joining us today. We are joined by Micah. Micah is part of leadership over at Origin Protocol. You guys probably know about Origin. They were the inventors of Wrapped OETH and Super OETH, and also Wrapped OS. Now, Wrapped OS is sort of broken into the zeitgeist with all of what they've been doing on Sonic, some of the most interesting yields. And today we're going to explore what makes Origin Protocol unique in terms of the LST landscape. But before we do that, Micah, why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself and Origin?
Sure, happy to do that. I've been at Origin for a long time, since before DeFi existed. And we were there, during DeFi summer, invented the first yield generating stablecoin. And I think the way I would describe our product offerings now, it's like yield products for smart money. So, a lot of very conservative, safe yield generating tokens and a couple of vaults. But, they're components that you can use in DeFi a lot of interesting ways. So if you want to take more risk and chase some of the higher yields, there's a lot of ways to do that. But these are all fundamental building blocks on a few different chains with revolving around liquid staking and stablecoins.
So OUSD, that was the OG asset that I remember with Origin. And then you guys came up with OETH, and now you guys have OS. Now, as far as I understand, the Sonic staking yield is somewhere around 5%. You guys have a 7.59% APY on OS. How is that possible? What's going on there?
Yeah, so all of these tokens are built on the same code base that originated back in 2020. And one key feature that we developed back then was what you might call boosted yield that comes from the token being in a rebasing state or a non-rebasing state, depending on where you hold it. So that can get a little bit confusing, but it's really simple. If you're holding one of these tokens, whether it's OS or one of the other yield tokens, you're just holding it in a regular wallet. You don't have to do anything. You don't have to worry. You don't have to stake it. You don't have to wrap it. You don't have to take any action. You just hold it in your wallet. Your balance goes up every day. But there are some people who they opt to put that token into a DEX pool, for example. So Swapex would be the perfect example for OS. And when they do that, they're intentionally foregoing that staking yield. And when they do that, they're getting some other incentive instead. They're wanting to maximize some Sonic points, or they're wanting to get some incentive, emissions from Swapex. And when they do that, the yield that their underlying S is generating by being staked, that yield is being rerouted to you as a regular OS holder, just holding it in an EOA wallet.
So any held OS is rebasing, sort of like we saw tokens way back in the day, like ST ETH, I think is a good example. Any wrapped OS is just intrinsically yield bearing. We've seen this with all of our wrapped yield bearing assets that we're familiar with nowadays. But, and this is what makes you guys unique, any OS that is used in an LP or DEX for liquidity is not rebasing. And it's giving that yield to OS and wrapped OS holders or users.
Yes. And actually, any OS that's held in a smart contract of any kind will not rebase unless the contract holder opts in to receive the rebase. And the reason for that is because, when this all started back in 2020 and we had OUSD in a Uniswap pool, we realized that the DEX was not capable of handling the accounting on a token where the balance goes up automatically every day without an on-chain transfer event or something like that. So that's why we disabled the rebasing indexes. But we actually have, if you're a token issuer, there's actually a new feature that we called yield forwarding, where we can designate that yield will go to a certain place, wherever the token issuer or the pool creator wants it to go. And we don't have to get too much into that detail because you don't have to worry about it if you're just holding OS or wrapped OS in a wallet. But what that's going to do is it's going to lead to deeper liquidity and higher trading volume for the token across a bunch of DEX pools. That's kind of, the next phase of the evolution of these tokens. And that will ultimately result in, a better peg and higher yield for everyone.
Which is incredible because effectively what you guys have done is taken the native staking rate of an asset, whether it be ETH or S or, well, those are the two major assets that I know of, but it looks like you guys also kind of have a dollar, even though that restaking narrative is yet untapped, and magnified it by some amount, leveraged it by some non-negligible amount. And so if people are looping these things, they would have an obvious preference for the one with the highest yield. And I think that is Origin's current edge plus composability. Now, you guys you guys have been really good at composability. We're going to talk about that in a second here with all of the places where you can play with the OS asset or derivatives of the OS asset. But before we do that, why Sonic?
This is a great question, which I love to talk about. Sonic has been like night and day, a different experience as like a builder, as a team. Not to mention, as a user, it's like super fast and an amazing experience just doing transactions on such a novel chain. But since we had these roots back in DeFi summer from 2020, Andre of Yearn fame was kind of at the cutting edge of that, and he was an inspiration for OUSD back in the day.
Kanye West.
What's that?
Kanye West. Kanye is his last name. Sorry.
Yeah.
Bad joke.
So, OUSD was kind of like a mashup back in the day of Yearn Vault and a rebasing token. Back then, it was Ampleforth was like the inventor of rebasing stablecoins. So we were inspired by Andre back then and have had a lot of respect for him over the years. So when we heard that Fantom was rebranding, it was an exciting thing for us to be able to maybe replicate DeFi Summer again, and we're starting to see that play out. And I mean, if we're honest, it's like, there's just a massive airdrop that Sonic is coming out with. That
200 million S for season 1. No, sorry, 200 million S over 1 year. Season 1 is going to be 6-month period, end in the beginning of summer. Right, yeah, big.
Yeah. And I think it's really smart the way they've designed it, because it's not going to be like a one and done thing like many other airdrops and L2s who, have these incentives and then the party's over. With Sonic, they have this like linear vesting of the airdrop. And then I think they're just proving here with, the way they've structured this and how good the chain is, that like people are having amazing experiences and they're so supportive of the builders. It has a potential to be much stickier than what we've seen on a bunch of other chains.
Right. And I mean, so I am typically not a fan of vesting and making people lock up their assets, because then it puts on inherent sell pressure. But what they've done is add composability to the vesting portion. So you get 25% of that airdrop immediately, which is really nice. We've done a lot of point speculation on this before. I'm not going to get into it here. But then the other 75% of your airdrop is going to be as a vesting NFT. So if you wanted to, and this creates so many like bond-like opportunities for speculators, you can sell that NFT, sell the rights to the rest of your airdrop. Someone else can buy that, presumably at a discount, as a like call option or like a bond on S over the next, whatever the vesting period is. I think that's really cool. And I think there will be like leverage, there'll be composability for these NFTs. And it really might bring back some new life to what do they used to call that? FNFT, financialized NFTs. Let's hope. I think that could be a really cool narrative. So I want to dive into a bit of the composability here, like what OS can do. Because if you don't have composability and just have a cool yieldy asset, you're just not going to be hyper competitive. We've seen this with so many really good teams, really good assets, where all they do is focus on building a really cool product and they never do the composability push. So, leveragers and strategizers have nothing to do with that asset. Like maybe you have the best stablecoin yield. It's like 8%, cutting edge, but you can't do anything with it. Well, someone who has a stablecoin yield of 5% leverage against 3%, you get net 11%, they're going to end up winning that TVL game. Here, you guys have not shied away from composability. In fact, you guys have done like a head first dive into all of the major protocols that are Sonic native. One of them is silo. We're going to look at this in a second. I think this might be the yield of the day. So I'm going to save like what I consider maybe the best for last. And I'll start with, in no particular order, because none of these are like the worst. I'm going to start off with StableJack because it's kind of a new protocol. It's kind of weird. I don't know if you can explain it. If you can't, I definitely can, because I spent so much time figuring this thing out. But so for those of you who don't know, there's a 20% yield on depositing wrapped OS that you're just getting in more wrapped OS. So this is what you would call like cash on cash, but it's like S on S yield, 20.62%, and you do get some gems. So like StableJack has gems, 70% is going to the PT, 30% is going to the YTs. So the way this works, I mean, do you know how this works? I'm happy to explain it if not.
No, I think you're excited about it, and you probably studied it deeper than I have. I do think that yield trading in particular on OS is very interesting.
Yes.
But yeah, go ahead.
Well, tell us why, because here's why it's interesting, right? There are points. So can you explain sort of what OS entitles you to in terms of Sonic points?
Yeah, I think you get 8x points for holding OS in whatever form it is, whether wrapped or not, and then you can, get a lot more when you do leverage and plug it into different protocols.
Right. So the way the points work on Sonic, for you guys who don't know, if you hold it, you get one rate. If you use it, you get twice that rate. And then there's also gems. So most of these protocols are participating in these gems systems, which is just a larger claim to the S airdrop when that comes. Now, some of these protocols like Swapex have actually made those gems composable. You can sell the gems. I mean, we really could nerd out about Sonic for a while here, but let's laser focus back here. So effectively, you have YTs, which is the opposite of Pendle. So here, the YT is like you deposit your principal and it grows. So you deposit your principal, you give up the rights to all of your Sonic points, and you do get gems out because that's a protocol-specific thing. You give up the rights to your Sonic points, and in return, people who are doing the opposite side of that trade, who are depositing wrapped OS, are getting a leverage exposure of 2.21x all of those points, and they're paying you an interest rate of 20.62%. So they're paying you an interest rate, 20.62% S on S yield for the rights to your points. So they're getting a 2.21x exposure. So if it's like 4 base points, 8 points to use it, they're now getting roughly 20 points to like per OS per day or per dollar per day or whatever it is for their position. And if you look at Pendle, that's a pretty compelling rate. Pendle might be pricing those points at even a higher yield. So it's cool, though it is a floating rate. It's not fixed rate. It's not quite like Pendle. And the PT, who are like the points speculators, they deposit their wrapped OS. It's not like buying YT. Your principal doesn't expire to 0. They deposit their wrapped OS, and they're simply paying an interest rate for the rights to all of the points, plus 70% of the gems on StableJack. It's cool. It's new. It's, low liquidity, guys. It's got like $1 million total TVL on chain, but I love new stuff, and especially if it's like doing something unique. So that's that. If you then go over to Pendle, you will see 2 things are happening. One, there's an underlying yield, 5.39%. It's like the leverage staking rate of a wrapped OS. But there's a huge gap here. So this huge gap is the speculation of points. So it's pricing the points here. And if we go over, it'll tell us how many points there are. YTs? Yeah. 8x multiplier. So it's pricing that 8x, the difference between these 2 things. So the difference between 5.6 and 9, we'll call that 6 to 9, 3 to 4% is what it's pricing those points at. So that's awesome. That's really cool. I like that. And okay. Oh, should we go to no. Well, wait. Let's do Swapex. Tell me about Swapex. What is the thesis there? And why is it so cool?
Well, Swapex is one of the, I guess if you trace it back far enough, solidly inspired dexes on Sonic. So, another thing that spawned from Andre back in the day. So, there are quite a few dexes on Sonic, but Swapex is where I think the best opportunity is to earn as an LP holding any form of OS. And you're actually seeing here on the screen that OS is being paired with a ton of different assets. And this is because of the yield forwarding feature that I was talking about earlier, where a bunch of these token issuers are able to forward the yield from OS into their treasury, or more interestingly, they can forward it into the bribe flywheel or the incentive flywheel on Swapex. So if you're familiar with Aerodrome or one of the other solidly inspired dexes. The idea is that as an LP, you deposit into one of these pools and you're foregoing the trading fees, but you're getting your yield from the emissions, the Swapex emissions that are directed by their XNFT voters. And what that ultimately results in, because of our yield forwarding, is that you as an LP earn more. You get more incentives to deposit on these pools than you would on another DEX. So you were talking earlier about cash on cash, S on S. I think the simplest strategy here is wrapped S OS. Yep. Where you're getting up to 17.56%. And the other thing that's interesting about SwapX is they have an integration with Ichi, ICHI, which manages the LP position for you. So if you've ever been an LP in one of these stable things, like, I don't know, you might say like ETH and wrap staked ETH or something like that on a bunch of different chains, you have to come in here and re-rack your position like multiple times a day if you want to be in that one tick that's earning, the maximum yield. Here, Ichi kind of does that for you. You just deposit into a single-sided vault, so you can deposit just OS, or you can deposit just wrapped S, and then they manage the position, and you can withdraw single-sided whenever you're done with it.
Yeah, so this is one of the things that was really cool about Aerodrome, and really love that a lot of solidly, actually not a lot of them, so I like this SwapX does this. They allow you to choose between, do you want the automated, like auto-managed position coming with that SwapX yield, which, here is like 17% on wrapped, not wrapped OS, or do you want to do it yourself? And if you do it yourself, don't worry, you will get what you earn. Like, you will get all the swap fees for your position. So you can choose to be your own farmer, Uni V3 sort of style LPing, and whatever you can earn is what you can get. You don't have to worry about like getting like wraps. You don't have to worry about getting swap X or getting all these different emissions. You can choose to do manually, or you can do automated, and of course you will do like better with the automated because of these really sort of boosted yields here. 17.5 for depositing OS, 13.1 for depositing wrapped S. Both very good yields. Now, I will say, I was kind of looking earlier, like if you didn't want to be exposed to any governance tokens, you could do this on Beefy. You can like deposit right into this exact pool on Beefy, and what they'll do is they'll auto compound for you. So they effectively say, if you don't want to compound, if you want to click as little as possible, if you're like a very busy person and just like auto compounding aggregators, you can go on Beefy, deposit that exact same position, not on stablecoins, but on correlated. Nope, let me just do boom, Sonic OS, and there it is, OS wrapped S SwapX Ichi. No, I know it's in there. I don't know why these are unpopulating. Sometimes it's an API issue, but it exists, right? And then you have all these other LPs. So like, let's say you're comparing an SUSDC pair on, like a Uniswap, and it's getting 50%. Awesome. Or you can get 104% for OS SUSD. And on top of that, you're also getting the points. You're getting the points for your deposit. So like on OS, it's 8x, and you're getting potentially ring points if you're doing, any SC assets here. It's fascinating. So the cool thing, SwapX is awesome. Consider checking it out for sure. Now I think we can look at what I think is going to be like the yield of the day, which is Pendle. Also, there is composability in Euler. I love Euler. I'm a huge fan of Euler. I'm an ambassador with them. Check them out as well. They have composability. The thing that I love about like Euler, Morpho, and like these other, even Camino and Solana, is the whole curator narrative. They've really found a way to attract lens side liquidity, which is just huge. But let's talk about Silo here, because Silo has taken this composable YT. So you have composable PT wrapped OS, which has an intrinsic yield of 8.966. Okay, so fixed rate, fixed date yield of 9%. Keep that in mind. Fixed rate, fixed date yield. This is not going to be variable. Once you lock it in, that's what you get until expiry. You can take that over to Silo, collateralize it, and then borrow S for 1.5%. That is a crazy arbitrage between lend rate and borrow rate. It's like, we're going to look at why it's crazy in a second here. I'll show you the leverage. But at a 90% LTV. Now, if you're a math nerd like me, you already know 90% LTV means 10x, right? 1 divided by 1 minus LTV. That's your leverage here. So let's do some fun math. 90% LTV again, 10x leverage, borrow cost 1.5, collateral yield 9%. That's a 76.5% APR on S. That is nuts. Tell me about this position.
Oh, well, I mean, you summed it up pretty well, but I think going back to the way that OS works differently than other LSTs, you were talking about how, since it has higher native yield, just holding OS, it gives you, or holding it as wrapped OS, it gives you a wider spread comparing it to another LST that doesn't have that boosted yield. And then here, when you add Pendle to the equation, it just amplifies that spread and makes the leverage staking strategy that much more lucrative.
Nailed it. Exactly right. Now, the fascinating thing is, if you thought Pendle was underpricing points, because maybe Pendle has some weird pricing because they're people who are speculating, who are purchasing the yield side of this, are uncomfortable with the vesting or like putting a big discount on that, and you think that the airdrop will be larger, just you can do the exact same play just with like OS instead of the PT version, and say that I think the points are actually going to be worth more than that, or the wrapped OS version of that. But I like fixed rate. I like, yield that I can have in my hand today. I don't mind giving up the points. But there's also this seemingly big incentive to deposit lend side S liquidity. Are you guys involved in that, or is that a Silo specific thing?
That's a good question. I think we might be helping bootstrap the pool there, that market. But we have other markets coming to Silo and other places, and so we're constantly moving those incentives around to different opportunities. The other thing that I wanted to mention about not necessarily a Silo or this leverage strategy, but with the yield speculation on Pendle or Spectra or StableJack, with OS you have this extra dynamic of people moving in and out of the DEX pools, causing the yield to go up and down for the regular holders. And so if you think that, more people are going to move OS into DEX pools, then that potentially means that the yield here is going to go higher and YT is going to be worth more. There's all these interesting games that you can play, and one thing we've learned is that the Sonic ecosystem loves different money games.
Yeah, I was gonna say, like, there's been the introduction of a lot of different ways to speculate. As I said before, gems are another way to gain share of the Sonic airdrop, and SwapX has tokenized them. You can literally sell your gem X's right here. So we have tokenized points. We have our tokenized shares of an airdrop. We have yield speculation on StableJack. We have rate speculations on Pendle. And then we have the composable versions of those on Euler. Actually, I don't think you guys are on Euler yet with the PTs, but definitely on Silo, hopefully soon to be Euler. It's composability is my best friend in DeFi, being able to use all of these fun Lego blocks everywhere. Maybe I'm a Lego maximalist, or it's just like my childhood coming out in adulthood. But it's been a blast, and you guys have really sort of allowed for a lot of that. I will say, some people may be like, well, okay, all of this is cool, all of this is amazing, but I am scared of the market conditions. Maybe I don't want to be like a super crazy long maximalist assets. Secret, guys, Hyperliquid is doing a season 2. And if you short the notional amount of your long position in S, you get paid 10% to do that. And you're farming, potentially, rumor, farming the Hyperliquid Season 2 airdrop. So there's all these different strategies that are made possible with these different Lego blocks. And yeah, it's cool to see protocols that are sort of in the middle of it. Now, last question. I know we're sort of short on time. You guys have had some of the biggest auditors in the industry audit Origin. I think it's like your Open Zeppelins, your Trail of Bits. Why did you guys go so big, I guess is a way to put it, on auditing?
Sure. Well, Open Zeppelin is the gold standard. I mean, they've audited Coinbase, Uniswap, Aave, I think even the Ethereum Foundation. And this is not something we can compromise on. Like, all these yields are amazing. Like, we love all these different composability opportunities. But if the product isn't safe and secure, then none of that matters. And so we prioritize security over absolutely everything, and Open Zeppelin has been the best partner on that. So we have them on retainer, and they audit everything we do.
Fantastic. Love to hear it. Now, again, I know we're short on time, but I want to give you a chance to say or shout out anything that I may have missed. I know I sort of went a little bit crazy with all of the things that I find exciting, but if there's anything that I missed, please fill us in.
No, I think it's great. I guess the last thing that we didn't really talk about, just, if people want to really have fun and take even more risk, there are a ton of different protocols launching on Sonic that are using OS as a component where they will pair their token with OS. And when I'm not even, very knowledgeable about how these things work, but if you're familiar with the Tomb Finance that was around back in the Fantom days, there are a ton of
protocols.
Yeah, a ton of different iterations on this. And so I don't want to name any of them because I don't know many of these teams. I don't know which ones are safe and which ones aren't. But if that's your jam, there are a bunch of really interesting ones coming out in the next few days that have OS as a component. And so, be safe, but Sonic, there's a lot of cool stuff happening on Sonic, and you have a lot of fun.
So you're saying DeFi Summer 2.0 is coming soon?
It kind of feels like we're already there.
Yeah. I won't say too much, but Sonic seems to be facilitating the make DeFi fun again sort of vibe. But I will say, with exponential fun comes some degree of risk. So I like the fixed rate leveraging. I like the sort of more sure thing, the birds in the hand instead of the birds in the bush. But if you want to go up the risk curve, Sonic should have some fun games for you to play soon. Micah, thank you so much for joining me. Hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you're looking to follow Origin and what they do, follow them on X, join their socials, Telegrams, Discords, and if you ever have any questions about Origin, you can't get a hold of them, just ask me and I will get a hold of them for you. Thanks for watching and have a wonderful rest of your day.